Hi, I'm David from Ducks in a Row. You've heard the old expression, leopards can't change their spots, right? Well, maybe that's not the case after all. For example, you might believe motorbikes are fun, or you might believe motorbikes are dangerous. Either way, you'd be right, for you at least, but it's an absolute certainty other people's brains won't be wired exactly the same way about this subject. Take the bike example. I know a bunch of people who have given up motorcycling after a crash, but I also know plenty of people who were scared of bikes, had a go on one and became avid fans of the hobby. In both cases, a formerly held belief changed, and that is the incredibly important point. Before we look at any detail around brain change, let me tell you where my interest started. I was working in Essex back in the mid-90s and running a world-class manufacturing change programme for a manufacturing company. It had been fantastic success. We had completely converted the shop floor to cellular manufacturing, turned off the MRP system, implemented Kanban, removed the whole of the warehouse. The whole thing had been amazing. Everywhere was colour-coded, 5S was prevalent throughout. It just really had been a fantastic project. A couple of years later I went back to see some friends I'd made there, Carl and Sharon, to see how things had been going, and they kind of said, yeah, come and have a look, you won't believe your eyes. So there's me walking through the front door thinking it's going to be fantastic, and I walked in and everything had slipped. The change just hadn't been sustained, and I was massively disappointed, to be honest. I didn't really understand why, and got into conversation with the guys and said, what's gone on? And they said, well, really, we didn't believe in all that shit in the first place. So, that when I really kind of said, you didn't believe in it, and they said, no, it was, it was rubbish. It was imposed upon us. We weren't consulted. Nobody listened to our ideas when we did try and get involved. We weren't valued. So it made me realise that, just the way people are made to feel, what they believe in the first place, whether something's good, bad, right or wrong, really determines their actions over years. And this is what sits at root of change programs and the problems we've got with sustainability in the market at large. What I didn't know then, but do know now, is that my friends Sharon and Carl hadn't changed the wiring and firing patterns in their brain. Whatever had happened through that change program, however we had communicated or acted as leaders in that change program, hadn't really landed very well with them, and that's why we got the response we did. What I realise today is, if you want to get an organisation to change a culture, you've got to change the people and what they believe in, and if you trigger the wrong emotional response, you're never going to get that to happen. We often talk about change to circumstances, our businesses, or even change to our beliefs in what's good or bad, like riding motorbikes. But what we're really talking about is the wiring in our brains. It's through this process of brain change we call neurogenesis, which means cells can rewire themselves, change the strength of the wiring that already exists, or even kill off complete neurons and just replace them with new ones. Our brain's adapting and changing to the stimulus in the world all the time, but it also adapts and changes in response to the way we think and the way we feel. Thinking is actually the firing of electrical impulses through the wiring in our brains. Sometimes the way our brain's wired slows us down and stops us doing things, mainly through fear. Reframing how we see the world, changing what we believe good or bad is, can help us get past such barriers. Think about someone doing a bungee jump. They're there, stood on the edge, waiting to go, and the fear gets the better of them. It's the anticipation, it's what they're imagining is going to go wrong that stops them acting. But then just a little change of framing. The instructor says, just think of diving in a swimming pool, and suddenly they're off, the fear's gone, and then the exhilaration cuts in. It's that same kind of fear that you get when you've got a bad leader. They're going to walk past your desk, you're wondering what they're going to stop and say, whether you're going to be in trouble or not, whether you've hit the targets. These are the kind of emotional responses and reactions, the kind of thinking that leads to the beliefs we've got about people and the way we respond at work. Now, when we talk about feelings and emotions in the brain, that's the release of chemicals. You've probably heard of some of them, like serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, norepinephrine, adrenaline, cortisol. You know, the stressor hormone. Everybody's heard of cortisol these days, talking about stress. It's how we react emotionally that really dictates our actions and our reactions to people and our environment, and whether we change or not. Our job as leaders really is to induce the right chemical balance in other people's brains. It's not their only responsibility, of course. Leaders are responsible for making profit, making money, making sure that there's a high performance culture. But you've got to ask yourself, do people that act out of fear create a high performance culture? The trick is to get the balance right, the balance of chemicals in people's brains. And to do that, you've got to create the environment in which people's brains perform at their best.